evening, everyone, and welcome to our session. I am Dr. Tarinee Puri on behalf of Voice of Healthcare, and I welcome you all to this session titled Preconception and Maternal Nutrient Supplementation Adapting to the Changing Needs, supported by Pfizer. As the recent months have been all about highlighting women's health, through engaging panel discussions, we aim to delve into the critical role that nutrition plays in preparing for pregnancy and supporting maternal and fetal health throughout gestation. This multifaceted discussion explores the evolving nutritional requirements of women as they transition through preconception, pregnancy, and postpartum stages. Furthermore, by addressing the changing needs of women at different stages of the reproductive journey, this panel aims to provide valuable insights, evidence based recommendations, and practical guidance for healthcare professionals, policymakers, and individuals seeking to optimize maternal and fetal nutrition. And now, I'd like to welcome our esteemed panelists for today. Dr. Suchitra Pandit, consultant, obstetrics and gynecology, Surya Hospitals. Good evening, ma'am, and welcome to our session.
Hello.
Dr. Girija N. Wagh, obstetrician and gynecologist, Cloudnine Hospital. Good evening, ma'am, and welcome
Hi.
to.
Hello.
So now, without further ado, we will begin our session. So my first question would be to Dr. Suchitra. What specific nutrients are crucial for a woman during pregnancy? And how do they support both the health of the mother and the development of baby?
Right. First of all, I would like to say I would love this woman to come to me for a preconception counseling. So I would have already told her about what the changes would be. But if she's come straight away to me during pregnancy, first 3 months of the pregnancy, most of the women would have nausea. They may have a little bit of vomiting. They may not be able to eat. They may have food. Not exactly allergies, but they may have a distaste for certain types of food. So they may not be able to consume a lot of things. So I would say, okay, take whatever you want in the first 3 months, as long as you're sure you're taking your folic acid, something to prevent that nausea, something to prevent the vomiting in case if it occurs, and try to include whatever foods they like, because in the first 3 months, you can't really talk to them about eating all the right kind of things because of their food taboos. But if they have no nausea and vomiting, I would say have a right balance, small frequent meals. Make sure your food has got proteins, carbs, and a good amount of whole wheat grains, along with fruits and vegetables. Today, many times, most of the working women and most of the young people, they are not liking vegetables. The only vegetable they like is potatoes and paneer. So we have to tell them, start including greens in your diet, and you can choose. There are so many vegetables available, right from spinach to different types of spinach which are available, to carrots, to beet, to green peas, to ladies fingers, tomatoes, cucumber. There are so many things which are available. So choose at least 5 to 7 green vegetables. Again, have a good helping of fruit. In the first 3 months also, if you're nauseated, you're able to take a banana and a apple, which tend to suppress the vomiting reflex. But otherwise, you can have all the possible fruits excepting the inner rind of pineapple, which is difficult to digest, and papaya, because papaya, actually, it is a raw papaya which is contraindicated. But because of the controversies, they say, okay, fine, don't have papaya, but you can have all the other fruits. And usually they tend to ask us, can I have Chinese and can I have Thai? Now Thai has a lot of raw papaya, and Chinese, sometimes we don't know about the Ajinomoto. So I tell them, if you like to have your Chinese, make sure you make it at home. But otherwise, normally a good balance of protein, carbs, and fats are necessary because they give you the energy. Carbohydrates are necessary again because they give you the energy, but proteins are the building blocks. So your diet must have a good amount of proteins. And first visit, I always like to ask them, are you a vegetarian or a non-veg? Because the non-veg people, they are able to get proteins through their natural diets. But even in their natural diets, in the first 3 months or first 4 months, many of them switch over to being vegetarian. So the vegetarian people, we tell them, look at the amount of proteins that you're having in your diet. Your dals, your different kinds of sprouts, paneer is there. You have nachni, that is ragi rich in proteins. So this way, try to balance out. And many women also tend to think, should I have milk? I don't like milk at all. Okay, doesn't matter. You have buttermilk, you have dahi, the standard dahi, you have the buttermilk. Though all those also will give you the calcium. At first 3 months we're not so worried about all the calcium supplements and iron supplements. We're more worried about the folic acid. And then of course, if you're trying to balance out their diet in the second trimester and the third trimester. Second trimester, the organs start forming well. First trimester is embryogenesis, and the third trimester, when all the organs that are formed are actually growing in size, and they are attaining their normal, the baby weights of the Indian standards. So therefore you need a good diet in both these trimesters. And usually when we say, an additional of generally 1800 calories in the first trimester, 2200 in the second, and 2400 in the third. So which means an additional of 340 calories in the second trimester, and third trimester about 450 calories. And of course you calculate these depending upon the height, weight, and the BMI, and then you plan out a diet. And I would think it's important, to have that nutritional advice given to them, what they can eat and what they cannot eat. I always tell them, if you're a non-veg eater, avoid mutton because it becomes a little difficult to digest in the first trimester. Have more of lean meat, that is chicken or fish. In the rainy season, particularly in our areas, Mumbai, I stay in Mumbai, we tell them to avoid too much of sea fish, particularly the pomfret, which is high in mercuric metallic. So they can have more of the river fish at that time. And otherwise, the tell them to avoid too much of tin food, too much of processed food. Have fresh food. Sometimes working women have food left over at night, and they try to do some dish of it in the morning. So the others are okay to have it. For a pregnant woman, I always say, have your fresh food. Morning का खाना आप शाम को खा सकते हो, but रात का रखा हुआ खाना, avoid eating it in the morning. Of course, fruits are okay. You can keep the fruits and don't have the very overripe fruits. So this would be my general advice for the nutrition.
Thank you, Dr. Suchitra. That was a very comprehensive answer. Thank you so much. Now, my next question would be to Dr. Girija. So, as ma'am already spoke about diets in different trimesters, I would ask you to elaborate on the vitamins, the minerals that are specifically required, and the deficiencies. If women in pregnancy are facing deficiency, then how would it affect them and their pregnancy, basically?
Yeah, see, one of the most important vitamins and minerals that we are concerned, especially in the Indian context, is the folic acid and the folates. That's one. The second one is the iron and the iron salts and its sources. And the third one is the calcium and the vitamin D. Now, why these are important? Because if you look at the way in the which the Indian food stuff is prepared and cooked, many times there's excessive processing which is done, and therefore despite be having access to food, even in the best nourished women, so called best nourished means coming from a good class of society, you will still find that there is a deficiency of folic acid and folates in our diets that we consume. Now, when these deficiencies happen, and especially it's very important, as Madam Suchitra said, that it should be sort of, she would prefer the woman comes to her before she conceives, because many times these deficiencies are ideal to be corrected before woman embarks upon getting pregnant, for the simple reason that at the time when you diagnose your pregnancy has already happened. When you come, your pregnancy test comes positive, already a lot of things have happened in that pregnancy, from the formation of the placenta, which is the root of that pregnancy growth, and from the formation of the embryo. Now,
Uh-huh.
these delicate processes, if we find that the folic acid and the folates are deficient, there are
Uh-huh.
high likelihoods of there being neural tube defects, where baby's brain system is not well developed. So
Uh-huh.
conditions such as anencephaly or certain brain tumors and developmental things can occur, which won't get diagnosed now, but which would manifest later on as the pregnancy advances. Secondly, even the formation of the placenta would require this folic acid and folates, because that would help in having a proper foundation of the pregnancy where problems wouldn't occur.
Okay.
Now, if you look at our country data, which has been projected now everywhere, you find that despite having so much of access to knowledge, food, doctors, medical help, and understanding, women continue to have iron deficiency anemia in our country, which is very serious. And this iron deficiency doesn't stop only at, giving rise to, the penultimate problem that we talk of is maternal deaths. At the time of delivery, you may bleed heavily and you are at risk of having this kind of postpartum hemorrhage and dying. But throughout pregnancy, also, what happens is when there is less hemoglobin, your oxygen carrying capacity is less. Iron deficiency is equivalent to hemoglobin deficiency many a times in our country. And less oxygen carrying capacity throughout pregnancy for the baby and the placenta definitely gives rise to so lot of oxidative stress in the pregnancy, putting this woman at risk of various complications of pregnancy and especially fetal growth restriction. And if you go into subtleness of it, we are now identifying that there is definite deficiency in myelination of the nerves of the babies which are born, and therefore babies will not only be born with anemia, but they will be born with compromised cognitive disorders. So these are very important for a future healthy community. Likewise, if you look at calcium deficiency, it has been identified that the Indian diets, when we studied them on an average, our daily calcium intake is only 800 grams, which is taken as deficient on the global standard. It has to be at least 900 to 1000, and therefore, in India, women have to be supplemented with calcium supplements, because otherwise, not only will they be affected with osteopenia and bone formation, which is deficient in the babies, but a very serious disease like preeclampsia, where the woman suffers from hypertensive disorders, which can cause complications both for the baby as well as the mother. And if you look at the fact that India is the diabetic capital of the world, vitamin D deficiency is identified to be preceding before woman develops diabetes. And therefore, despite we having such a heavy good sunshine in our country, because of lack of exposure or maybe whatever reasons or understanding, rampantly women are suffering from vitamin D. And one more thing, when I was trainee or maybe just about a decade back, we weren't seeing so much of incidence of hypothyroidism in pregnancy. But today that has also increased. Now, hypothyroidism, part of it is attached to iodine deficiency. Iodine deficiency in the diets can correlate and get into giving you diseases like hypothyroidism, which are going to influence your entire endocrinological system, calcium metabolism, vitamin D metabolism, and complicate pregnancy, and even program the baby to many adversities. So these are by and large very important gross things which have to be plugged in ASAP to create a healthy mother and a healthy baby.
Thank you so much, Dr. Girija, for such an informative answer. Now, my next question is to Dr. Suchitra. So, how does maternal obesity or underweight status influence pregnancy outcomes? And what dietary recommendations are typically provided for women in these situations?
Right. So, just let's start off with the obesity. Obesity is on the rise. And today we are finding, just as in India, malnutrition is very, very common. On almost an equal footing, the obesity is also common. So today we are talking of obesity as BMI when you're looking at height per body meter square, and then you're calculating. And usually you want to have a BMI of about 27, 28 is okay, but anything above 29, 30 is going into obesity, and above anything above 40 is going into morbid obesity. So why don't we want obesity? Is obviously because the outcomes, the maternal and the perinatal outcomes, are not brilliant at all. So if this woman had come to me earlier, again, as I said, preconception is such an important time, because you can address these issues much more earlier. You can get them onto a good diet, good exercise. You can explain them what are the advantages of losing weight and how it will help them conceive and to carry on the pregnancy. So if this woman, again, as I said, if she hasn't come to me earlier and she comes to me straight away at the OPD, I'll find out, is it just an obesity or is it something else? What exactly is the cause of this obesity? Sometimes there is PCOS, which is linked to obesity. PCOS is when a woman has got irregular cycles and she's probably conceived on her own, or with some ovulation induction. And thereby she's come to me. So we'll try to find out, has she been putting on weight right from the, is she obese from the start, or has she put on weight in the last 3-4 years? What exactly is the status? Has she been doing anything about it at all? What happens is, in conception itself sometimes can become difficult, but if the woman has conceived, and if the woman has got PCOS and diabetes, sometimes we have not checked the sugars. She's come to us straight away. If there's a high hyperglycemia at that time, then it can lead to conception failures, it can lead to neural tube defects, it can lead to cardiac anomalies and skeletal dysplasias, and the cauda equina syndrome. So it's always good to have your BMI in the best possible frames before she conceives. But then again, the incidence of recurrent pregnancy failures are much more higher. A pregnant woman who is obese is also more prone to diabetes, that is more prone to hyperglycemia. Chances of urine infection, candidiasis, groin infections are much more common. People who are examining them also have a difficulty in examination, because these women are on the heavier side. And then they have to have more frequent ultrasound, they have to have separate timings coming for the clinic, particularly if they're morbidly obese. And you have to look at their diet. Look, they're going to feel hungry, they're in the habit of eating irregularly. So first thing is a structured diet, getting them to eat at the right time, small frequent meals, walking for 10 minutes after every meal. These are just the very basics. I would like to get a nutritionist involved so that we can calculate exactly what she has to eat. But again, as I said, as a balance of carbs, proteins, and less of fats. But she must reduce the the typical carbohydrates, and have more the complex carbohydrates, like oats or muesli. Today you've got so many varieties of oats uttapa, oats dosas, oats upmas. So include those, because those complex carbohydrates will be causing less of a hyperglycemic index, and that will be much more better for her. Getting her to eat fruits and small frequent meals, as I already said, and not having a late night meal, but at the same time, when she gets to bed, she can have a glass of milk or something to eat, because when she sleeps through the night, she shouldn't get into a hypoglycemic phase. And of course, as she's going up the trimesters, the second and the third trimester, probably her caloric requirements are increasing. So we'll have to increase the amounts of the portions of the food that she's eating. And really, if I have a printed diet chart, it is so much more better. Many of them, as I said, like potatoes. Should they have potatoes at all? If they like only potatoes, a small amount once in a way is okay. But otherwise, have lots of greens, lots of the proteins which I mentioned earlier. And many times, in because it's pregnancy, we tell them include soups also in your diet, because that gives you that feeling of fullness. So particularly before dinner, you can have soup, a clear soup, or you can have a soup made of something like dudi, or the green vegetables. That soups are very very nice, they're tasty, and they have that feeling, so the woman doesn't want to eat a lot at that time. Many a times with obesity, the eating binges are very very strong. So this is something that we have to address. If she feels hungry in between, what does she do? Well, she can always have crackers, or she can have a fruit, or she can have salad. So you'll have to give her all those different recipes to eat. And then they like to eat out on the weekends. So should you allow that at all? So initially I tell them, as far as possible, eat home cooked food. But if you have to eat out, make sure that you're having something wholesome, having something that is cooked well. Avoid eating open salads, which are, or open cut fruit. Have something whole there, so that the hygiene part is also maintained. Once in a way, if they eat out, you can decide, you can tell them, they feel a little, it's like a cheating diet, but they can have that. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we've checked out their sugars, so that we know that the sugars are all in the right phase. As far as undernutrition or a very thin girl is concerned, many a times, they're not able to eat simply because they have got their food fads, they've got food allergies, and sometimes, unfortunately, but they do suffer from not a typical irritable bowel syndrome, but something like that. and whatever they eat, there's an intestinal hurry. They're not able to keep the foods. They have a lot of micronutrient deficiencies. So here in this case, I would again take the help of a nutritionist, plan out a good diet and see how much you can eat. Many a times, we say give a high protein diet, but someone who's already having an absorption problem, for them to take on more amount of proteins is difficult. So sometimes, you can tell them to have something like the protein biscuits, or protein, additional protein in milk, which might give them that amount that they need to eat. Very thin women also have a problem with conception. They have a higher problem of hyperthyroidism, and they can also have a higher incidence of miscarriages, and of course smaller babies. So in both these groups we have to look out, is there a fetal growth restriction. Most of the time in the obese women, they tend to have bigger babies. In the thinner group, they tend to have the smaller babies. But in both, the exceptions are there. But giving them different kinds of a diet, different recipes to suggest, that will help them motivated to stick to their diet plan. Many of the thin patients, they don't add it if they have a hyperemesis, that is, they're not feeling like eating in the first trimester. They just practically live on just biscuits and maybe some kind of juices. But if they want to have juices, it's better to have fruits. But if they have juices, it should be the freshly peeled juices. And to all the groups of women, we tell them to avoid colas, particularly cokes, and the fizzy drinks or the aerated drinks. Avoid having desserts, which is a routine in most of the Indian houses. So in the thin woman, you can advise her to have more, she can have the desserts. But for the obese girl, the one who's having a higher BMI, I would be very careful and tell her, if you want to have a dessert, then you really have to make sure you've done your exercises, you've walked that much. So when you're walking 5 times a day, you've actually done 10 minutes each time. You've walked 50 minutes, and over and above that, walk for an additional half an hour. For the thin girl, I tell them, well, take it in your stride. If you can walk, if you're metabolically active, it's always better, because thin girls with PCO can have an insulin resistance syndrome and can have very, very high levels of hyperglycemia. So, again, in both these cases, we need to check on their sugars and their glucose tolerance test as soon as possible, because India being the diabetic capital of the world, we have to test them as soon as possible and accordingly advise them their diets. But it's important to monitor these girls to make sure they eat the appropriate kind of food, and no fasting at all in pregnancy is what I tell them. And this even applies to the Muslim community, when they have their Ramzan going on. I tell them preferably avoid doing that continuous fasting, for 10, 10, 12 hours. It's not healthy for the baby at all.
Thank you so much, Dr. Suchitra. It was very insightful. Now, my next question would be to Dr. Girija. So, as ma'am also mentioned sugar levels, and you too mentioned about gestational diabetes before. So, my next question would be, what are the potential consequences of not managing gestational diabetes through diet, and what dietary recommendations or modifications are typically recommended for women diagnosed with this condition during pregnancy?
See, basically, we have to understand that diabetes is an extension of a physiological insulin resistance, which is essential for baby's growth during pregnancy. So basically, what happens inside the body is that the insulin doesn't effectively, tries to maintain sugars in your body so that the baby will keep on getting good nutrition and will not suffer from any kind of growth issues. But in Asian women, and because of our various kinds of lifestyle and genetic predisposition, environmental issues, we Indian women, pregnant women, tend to get diabetic very easily. And this entire control through diet or through medicines or physical activity level is to ensure that the sugar levels are always kept at an optimum. Now, these sugar levels, because if there are sugar spikes, let's say if there is sudden sugar spikes which are going to occur, they are not only going to affect the mother's body, but they're also going to affect the baby. Now, grossly, if I tell you how, like mother becomes at risk of developing diabetes. Let's say she's not a diabetic before, she became pregnant and now became a diabetic for the first time. She's at risk of developing lifetime diabetes immediately after her pregnancy. She's at risk of developing cardiovascular complications immediately after pregnancy. The diabetes is not only about sugar rising in your body. This sugar which rises in your body starts affecting your small lining of the capillaries in the entire body. And that predisposes you to complications such as you may have heart ailments, you may have various kinds of illnesses, you may have a heart attack. Many women have silent heart attacks when they have diabetes. There can be cardiac myopathies, your kidneys can get affected. So diabetes and the duration of the sugars, how much it has been in your body, high sugars, that also determines the possibility of these complications. And in pregnancy, what happens? We have such a metabolism that it enhances that thing. So in a non-diabetic patient, if a non-pregnant patient, if there is diabetes, this would probably affect this woman over a period of, let's say, 3 years. I'm showing an arbitrary thing. But in a pregnant woman, it will start affecting instantly. You understand? So therefore, it's very important that the sugars are maintained. Now, this is okay. One aspect is about the mother herself. So many times when we are talking of diabetes, women feel that we are focusing more on babies. It's not so. We are also concerned about that mother. That mother should not also develop any problems. Now, what happens to the babies is if there are continuous sugar spikes that are happening in the mother's diet, now, like many substrates, like oxygen delivery directly goes through the placenta to the baby. Amino acids, which are protein breakdown products, will directly be delivered to the baby. Likewise, sugar, when it rises in the mother's body, will directly get delivered to the baby. Now, this baby is yet not armed to process its own sugars. It is dependent on the mother to do it. But those sugar spikes will gradually start making this baby fat. You understand? So for us, we know chubby babies look very beautiful and very nice. But these chubby babies are not really chubby out of health. They are chubby out of ill health. What happens is they need more oxygen. And then because they have become fat, their blood has become very concentrated. Now they can't carry oxygen. And then what complications can occur? Now, if you decide to look at diabetes during pregnancy, what are our challenges as doctors? You have on one side a mother who is already a diabetic mother. She has developed diabetes. Since in our country, many times awareness is not there, it happens to be so that the obstetrician is the first person to diagnose that diabetes. So she comes in the first trimester, we do a test, we have the typical test by the government of India, the DIPSI test, and then we diagnose that, oh, she is already a diabetic. Now, already a diabetic woman who has sugars which are very high in her body and she becomes pregnant without any pre-pregnancy optimization, she is at risk of developing abnormalities in the baby. And these abnormalities can be very lethal, like the brain doesn't develop, the spine doesn't develop, the lower limbs don't develop, the heart defects can be there. So every thing that happens in the first trimester, in the first 12 weeks of pregnancy, the baby's organs are forming. And at that time, if you have an insult of high sugars, these women are going to develop complications in the baby, which would come to realize only when the baby is around 16, 18, 19, 20 weeks, we come to realize, oh, baby has a complication. And then some of these abnormalities are so grave that we may have to consider discontinuing this pregnancy because it is not going to be compatible with life. Now, many others are women who get diagnosed as diabetics now in the middle of the pregnancy. Like you found them first trimester, they were not diabetic, but now you did a challenge test again in the second trimester and you found that, oh, they have become diabetic. Now, these are gestational diabetes, which were abnormally not having abnormal sugars before, but now they have started developing hyperglycemia. In these patients, they are at risk of developing hypertension. They have a risk of developing preterm deliveries where the membranes may just give way and they may deliver. Or they may be having genitourinary infections, which will take a serious turn. They may land up in pyelonephritis, sepsis, and things like that. Or they would land up in hypertensive disorders because the same kind of pathogenesis is there at the background. So their blood pressure will start rising. And the babies are at risk of miscarriages, being born preterm, being born so heavy and big, requiring instrumentation at the time of delivery. risking the life of the mother as well as the baby. Worst thing that can happen is, which is something that so many tests we try to do, so many surveillance we do, but we are, unfortunately, there is no single test which can tell us that is this baby going to have sudden demise inside. Suddenly the mother comes for checkup, everything seems to be fine, and then we find that the baby, she comes for the next visit, or she says, doc, I can't feel my baby's moving, and the baby is dead inside. Now, this is one of the most gravest things, and believe me, when we are counseling these patients now, it's very difficult to say this. That, what are we scared of? We are scared of that your baby may suddenly go, will not be able to take it inside, and therefore babies have to be kept under close surveillance. The woman has to ensure that her sugars are always at a level. She's taking whole lot of antioxidants, which Madam Suchitra just now said, micronutrients, proper dietary things. She has to do a exercise, because that's going to see, simple walking, even if you walk for 40 minutes, that will cause the the insulin and the calorie expenditure which comes from your big muscles of the thighs. So those thigh muscles will act, and they will try to keep your sugars down. So all these things are essential. Many times our experiences are, patients go, sometimes they don't take it very seriously. But these are important. It's not only dietary, it's physical activity, it's mental health as well. You have to be very calm and quiet, less anxious, because even that gives rise to catecholamine surge, and you may have abnormal sugar control. Lot of fear, scare, especially coming from sources from where they get try to get knowledge and they get scared. And then you have to take medications as well. Medical therapies have to be done. Sometimes some women would be asked to do a continuous sugar monitoring. So all these essentials are there, and especially if they have very serious background risks, we have to look at her holistic health. Not only at the, it's not about only sugar rising and sugar dropping. There are so many other things which are around it, which make, these patients as our very special patients. Because we really have to do a very close surveillance, and sometimes patients are very reluctant. Kitna mere piche pade ho, ye khao, wo khao, and all that. So, but that is very essential, and we have seen that if you optimize this health correctly, if you do those right surveillances at the right time, follow everything, wonderful results are seen. We have been able to see, our purpose of screening for diabetes during pregnancy and treating is, we are having a very futuristic understanding. We don't want to, program the future generations of this country to diabetes, because now we know we have very high incidence of diabetes. But if we are able to modify this risk while the baby is in the womb of the mother, and ensure that the future generations don't have diabetes, that will be our biggest achievement and a success story.
Yes, ma'am.
And what to adding on to what Girija is saying, the mental health of these women, particularly if they are a high BMI, low BMI, and we give them so much evidence, and mental health sometimes can go for a toss. So simultaneously, we have to keep assessing that mental situation, and keep boosting up that morale, and therefore that family support. Sometimes, we often find that these girls are single nuclear families, only husband wife are there, there's nobody to support. So we always tell them, call your mother or call your mother-in-law, so some sort of support, or call your friendly neighbor, someone should come with you for the visit, so that they also absorb whatever we are saying. So keeping that mental health along with this is very, very essential.
Thank you, Dr. Girija. Thank you, Dr. Suchitra. So now my next question is to Dr. Suchitra. So, ma'am, like in the first answer, you mentioned some taboos. You mentioned there are certain things that women think they shouldn't consume, and then you also mentioned some things that they actually should not. So, could you add a note on both the food types?
Yeah, see, basically what I had said is there should be a balance of protein, carbs, and fat, and it should be the good quality fats. And along with that, we are looking at protein, vitamins, and minerals, as Dr. Girija has just mentioned. So the do's and the don'ts are, as long as you're eating a structured diet, no problem. You can have plenty of water. We didn't mention about water, but it's important for a pregnant woman to have at least 3 liters of water. Many of the office going girls tell me that they have only one glass during the entire day, and they come home and they have the second glass, so which is barely 500 ml. I said, what about your water intake? Well, I just go to the washroom only once or maximum twice a day. That's not at all healthy. It's important for a pregnant woman to have at least 3 liters of water minimum. And water, you could have also buttermilk, could have coconut water. It's not mandatory. People tend to think if I drink coconut water every day, I'll have a child with very good hair. I don't know, it's a myth, but it's not true. It's not mandatory to drink coconut water every day. But yes, if you like it, you can have it. You can don't have it every day. You can have it maybe twice a week or something like that. Second thing is, you can have fruit juices. Those also are, good liquids for women to have. But I always prefer women to have fruits, because whole fruits give you also the fiber. Like when you have orange juice, then you've missed out on the fiber totally. When you have an orange, you've taken that fiber, and that fiber is very good to make the bowels work. Reduces the constipation bit of it. And the do's and the don'ts again is, avoid eating food which is unhygienic. Avoid food which is open, kept. When we all love to eat chaat. So you make chaat at home, and then you have it instead of having the pani puri which is there outside. Because particularly in pregnancy, if you have a tummy upset, we are always giving antibiotics, are always, we have to decide, oh, there's a mother and baby. So restricted amount of choices that we have. So eating healthy food is important. Avoid too much of tinned and processed foods. Avoiding wafers. The evening snack of many of the office going girls is a cup of chai and a packet of wafers. Well, that's not healthy. You can have your chai, but you have a healthy snack. And there are enough healthy snacks now, which are being made by various companies, made of oats, made of nachni, made of bajri, and healthy stuff. You can have sprouts, healthy sprout bales. So those are better options to have as snacks. And again, the do's, they some of them are into eating desserts and ice creams and Indian mithai. Small amount once in a way is fine, but is it mandatory that you must have something every day? Avoid. And again, general principles are, if you want to have a dessert, it's better to have it in the afternoon than in the evening, because you can digest it out. At night, you have your dessert and then you go off to sleep. That's not healthy. So that is another thing. The other thing is avoiding colas, all the fizzy drinks which I've already mentioned before. Some people tend to, they're addicted to the diet cola, diet coke. Tell them it's oh, just avoid that. What's your problem in drinking water or milk or buttermilk or chas? There are so many wonderful options that are there, Indian options which are there to have. And again, a lot of families, they have this habit of having breakfast at home, carrying that dabba, but the sham ka khana is always outside. So it could be dhokla, fafda, or maybe just a chaat or a Punjabi diet or whatever. But avoid, in a pregnancy, have home cooked food is what I always say. Don't make it a habit to have chana bhatura every day. There's so much of maida. Maida is not healthy for a pregnant woman to have on a regular not healthy for most people, but in pregnancy we definitely should avoid. So that balance should be there. Kya nahi khana hai, kya khana hai. And once again, I just repeat, a lot of the non-veg eaters, they change over to a semi non-veg and more of a vegetarian diet, probably because they find it difficult to eat. People tend to think chicken is heaty, it causes more of calories, but it's not strictly true. They don't want to eat eggs because they feel there is too much of heat generated. So it's not true. You can have an egg. If you're not allergic, you can have an egg, you can have chicken. Mutton is a little difficult to digest because it's got a very high, the fiber content and the cholesterol content is high. So I tell them to restrict that amount. It's not mandatory that you have to have non-veg every day. There are enough vegetarian proteins, but you eat whatever you like to eat. At the same time, make sure that it's cooked at home. uh, Another important thing is, they always have this question of, I want to eat nuts, but what is the best time to eat nuts? Never have nuts first thing in the morning, because when your tummy is empty, you've not eaten anything, those nuts may cause a reaction and you may have a tummy upset. So the best time to eat nuts is about 11 to 12 o'clock, the mid morning snack. So breakfast, mid morning snack, lunch, mid afternoon snack, dinner. And in the mid afternoon snack or in the mid morning snack, they can have their nuts. And in the nuts, we always recommend 3 4 almonds if possible, one walnut. But do we talk about cashew nuts? Not really. uh, Dates are fine, maybe one date in a day. Too much of dates is also, though it is natural sugar in diabetics, we tend to avoid that, but maybe one. Do they want to have raisins? Yes, once in a way. A lot of them like to have the black raisins at night, which helps them with their bowel action, which is perfectly fine. But a good selection of fruits is very, very important. Have at least 3 fruits in a day. If not three, kam se kam do to khao. Can I have mango? Yes, you can. As long as you're not having the seed, you're having the pulp, that's fine. Mango has a lot of fiber and has a lot of antioxidants. It's a seasonal fruit, but too much of mango because of the fiber can give rise to loose motions. So many of the the communities, once they buy the mangoes, they keep them in water for some time. They feel that reduces the heat of the mango. Well, there's no evidence to say that's correct or wrong, but many of them practice it. So I say fine, as long as you're eating it washed, which is good enough, you can go ahead with that practice. And of course, take your regular vitamins. Sometimes we do need to add on micronutrients because we don't have additional in our diet, as Dr. Girija had mentioned right in the beginning. Sometimes zinc we need choline, we need iodine. So then those micronutrients can be taken. We have our many of the antenatal capsules which contain these micronutrients. So it's important, give them. But do not forget your folic acid and calcium and zinc. Very, very important for us to have them. And zinc also today is coming up in a big way. So many of the companies have advised to put iron and zinc together, because as iron helps in the cognitive development or the myelination of the fibers, so too zinc is important for the cellular processes which go on. So that also can be included.
Ma'am, could you also add a note on specifically caffeine and coffee consumption during pregnancy?
Yeah, that is a very, very important question, because today I don't know what is so great about the coffee. People just drink 8 to 10 cups of coffee, and then I tell them, well, the standard, I if I have my coffee, I have it with lots of milk, and maybe I'll have it morning and evening. It's okay to have that, as long as you're restricting it to less than 300. In fact, the ACOG guidelines say 200 milligrams a day of caffeine is good enough, which is 2 mugs of coffee with milk. But if you're going to constantly have that black coffee come, I don't know, it's an addiction. Probably it reduces the appetite, it reduces, it increases initial days, it increases the alertness, and that's why people get addicted to it. But mind you, caffeine has its ill effects on the fetus. Miscarriages are known, fetal growth restrictions are known, and very, very importantly, lack of sleep. So pregnant women tend to have a lot of insomnia also if they stick to coffee. So does it mean that tea is good? Again, the same applies. Even tea has some amount of caffeine in it. So if you have 2 cups of tea a day, which is fine. If you want to have green tea that has got less of caffeine, if you want to have the white tea, but too much of herbal tea also is not recommended. And remember, if you feel you're getting a headache all the time, sometimes it's also because of the caffeine induced hyperacidity. As it is in pregnancy, women tend to have an acid reflux. But with the too much of teas and coffees, that acid reflux gets aggravated and can give rise to a headache, nausea, vomiting. And then you start wondering what's happened. Has the BP gone up or what's exactly happened? But it's just the wrong consumption of food that they've had. And just one more word on the shellfish. A lot of women like the shellfish, but many of them, they are scared of eating it. So if there is no known allergy, you can have, but restrict the amount, because many times women get allergies with shrimps and with the shellfish, particularly the mussels. So be careful, have a small amount. If you're okay, then you have it. Otherwise, just stick to your simple fish that you're normally eating.
Thank you so much, Dr. Suchitra. Now, my next question is to Dr. Girija. So, what dietary adjustments are recommended for managing common pregnancy-related issues like morning sickness and constipation, and so on?
See, first and foremost is, if you go to our traditional foods from Kashmir to Kanyakumari and east to west, we were finding that whenever there was a pregnant woman in the house, the first meal that used to be early in the morning would be a carb based thing, like rava, what we say is suji halwa, or suji made into upma, or maybe added with some vegetables and all, used to be the first thing. So that breakfast in the morning, which is very easy on digestion, one, and secondly, which will immediately give you some some energy. Like you've been hungry all night, and then you get up and start taking nuts, as madam said is not right, or you start taking some fruit early in the morning. Or the worst nowadays is the coconut water first thing in the morning. It will cause so much of vomiting in the morning. So if you are feeling very nauseated, you can start taking some warm water to it. You can add some crushed, ginger. Ginger juice is known to help. There are studies which have been done by our nursing staffs where they have found that ginger juice along with warm water in the morning can help you. Otherwise, you can start with some dry snack. Like many times in our households, we have some sort of a mithai made with suji, or some sweet bread which we make, like we call it as dashpi or sakkar para, or any of these. So you can take the dry stuff first, and then maybe you do your morning stuff. Don't go on to take tea and coffee first thing, so that your pukiness will increase. You can also, nowadays the modern girls are using some those cress seeds, chia seeds and all. They also help a lot in preventing vomiting, and they give you a load of antioxidants to start with the first thing. So start your meal and let your breakfast be a good meal of a good balance of proteins. It has to be also probiotics, like we are talking a lot about indigestion related issues. And that can be because one of our aims and objectives in nutritional guidance during pregnancy is maintaining a good gut health, because gut health will ensure not only that she'll be protected from infections of the genitourinary system, but gut health will also help us in proper absorption of micronutrients. And so therefore there will be a wonderful pregnancy experience if she doesn't suffer from any kind of dyspepsia. Don't go hungry for a long period of time. That is another important mantra, because if you remain hungry, then acid reflux and all will increase, and that will give rise to more of nausea and generally tummy upsets. Third important thing is cravings. Now, why do cravings occur? Cravings occur because you are not taking enough nutrition. Craving is a sign of improper nutrition. So let's take an example. For example, you take a morning breakfast of an upma with a boiled egg, with sprouts and a yogurt and a fruit. Compare it with just taking an aloo paratha, or compare it with taking something which is completely carb based only, poha. There's nothing else to balance it. You will start feeling hungry very early. You will start feeling tired very early. You'll feel like craving, and usually cravings will pull you to wrong foodstuffs. Then you will start feeling like eating some chaat, something very spicy. So if you ensure that your every meal is a composite meal, it has a proper balance of protein, fiber, micronutrients, and probiotics, then you will not feel those cravings. So these are self tests to ask yourself: do I feel tired? Do I feel hungry all the time? Do I feel happy all the time? Do I have dyspepsia? Do I have bitterness in my mouth? Do I have lot of gas formation, or do I have loose stools? Do I have constipation? So if you ask these questions yourself, you'll find your answers as well. Now, coming to constipation, if you look at all the complications that we discussed, from gut health to diabetes to hypertension to maintaining your proper nutrition, fiber content, both macro and micro, soluble and insoluble fiber of the food is extremely important. And ideally, women during pregnancy should consume at least 150 to 200 grams of fiber per day. So typically, if you take 4 types of fruits, 4 types of salads, starting from your breakfast to your end meal, it is something that can be easily accomplished. So if you take proper fiber, you will not get constipation. So if you have constipation, that means you're not taking proper meals, you are not taking proper water content, and generally you are taking highly processed meals. So find out your own solutions, and believe me, whenever, like, I have worked with many patients through their nutritional diets and everything and worked, and sometimes someone are very hard nuts to crack. And then I say, okay, now I have a nutritionist sitting next door. I say, go there and ask her. And little bit of change, things really change. What does that mean? That it is something which can really be modified. So why not have an open mind towards it and try to work on it? And this will be, these are very simple solutions, but that take a long way through having a wonderful pregnancy experience, I feel. We must all enjoy pregnancy, the doctor as well as the patient.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Dr. Girija. Actually, I realized that the importance of balance diet. I mean, it's definitely important in pregnancy, but even generally, the example of poha and the cravings, it happens even normally. So that was really interesting. So yeah, so with this, I would like the panelists to now give their closing remarks before we conclude the session. Something that they would like to tell the pregnant women out there or their families. We'll start with Dr. Suchitra.
Yeah, I would still like to tell them that please, henceforth, your family members, whoever girls are wanting to conceive, come for a preconception counseling, because we can look at all your, your history. If everything is good, we are happy with that. But if there is some little change to be made because of the BP or because of any health issues, that can be addressed, and you can start taking folic acids. And when you're starting to garden, you want to enrich the soil, so you got enough time to do that. And this is a pregnancy, so you can take all the lovely supplements that are available, and then try to conceive. But of course, if you have conceived, please visit your doctor, enjoy your pregnancy, don't be fearful, and don't listen to all the stories that your neighbors or your close friends tell. Millions of women have delivered before you, and millions will deliver after you. And pregnancies have not been scary. You go to your doctor and you help your doctor to serve you better. Register yourself as soon as possible. Take all your tablets correctly, and don't be wavering about choice of doctor. Many girls want to go to their mother's place for the first delivery. Tell your current doctor right in the beginning, I'm planning to go, but don't wait for the 7th and the 8th month to see your new doctor. Go by the 5th month, do your anomaly scan, and go. But if you keep changing doctors, you will miss out on the treatments, and then you cannot blame the doctors. We want to help you, because eventually our mission is to happy mother, healthy mother, and a healthy, safe delivery. So we are there to help you, but you should also allow us to help you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Suchitra. Now we move on to Dr. Girija.
See, basically, plan your pregnancy well and to be fearless. I would always want them to enjoy. Many times, the moment nowadays, what's happening, the moment the pregnancy test comes positive, on the second day of missing periods, they will give a frantic call saying, Doctor, I'm having backache, I feel vomiting, I feel scared. There's nothing to worry. It's just a physiological extension of your body. Like we came of age, we started menstruating. Now we have got into the family way, we are making babies. So there is nothing to be worried about, getting pregnant and getting anxious about it. Because I think a lot of knowledge which is getting up, more than it giving you assurance and empowerment to face this wonderful stage and phase of your life, there's a lot of fear segmented to it. And then please do not allow all these myths and facts. Just your doctor is the best person. I tell my patients, before Google, I came into existence. And before I'm sitting in before I'm sitting in front of you, I've gone through so many experiences, so many books, to be able to eligible to give you what is essential. And please believe me that if you land up in problem, it's only going to be me who is going to deal with it. So therefore, it's very important that you trust me and you listen to me, and don't get and make it a family affair. You're not sitting there in your lonely corner. Making babies is an entire family and a societal action. We are all as human beings committed to ensuring that our future generations are healthy. And for us doctors, the means are the women, the pregnant women who come to us. through them we are able to contribute to the betterment of the social building. So therefore they have to trust us, and they have to trust themselves, because these babies are not only for you at all. They are your contribution back given to the society, and therefore we all are committed towards creating a healthy future nation. And if that is understood, when we look at the larger picture, then all of us are on the same page. It's definitely a wonderful thing to deal with. And as Suchitra madam said, that currently post COVID especially, we have become a little more conscientious, we have become more aware, and we have realized that there are a lot of mental health issues that women are suffering from. So, you shouldn't deter if a doctor is asking you a few questions. We have certain questionnaires, we have certain ways of identifying and understanding. And then we may suggest, we usually suggest that why don't we take a counseling session, or why don't we go into a psychiatrist understanding, just to rule out whether we really have an organic problem, or do we need to generally don't have anything. Because it is important. Suddenly what has happened is, because of so much of knowledge, we have become overwhelmed, you know and the human brain and the mind is yet not adjusting to this new thing that has happened in our lives. So it's okay, it's perfectly fine to get these counseling, because that's very important to identify these things and nip them in the bud itself. So this would be my message to everybody.
And just last line, please discuss contraception with your doctor, because
Yeah.
after you've delivered, you don't want to immediately get pregnant. You want to give that time. So please don't hesitate. The doctor will discuss, but you keep your eyes and ears open and discuss these issues without feeling shy.
Thank you so much to our panelists today for this interesting and insightful discussion. And with this, we would like to conclude our session for today. Thank you so much and have a nice day, everyone.
Bye
Thank you,
bye.
Tarinee.